Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome once again to Nerd Week Live, the show in which we, the folks at Nerd Caliber, talk to you about nerd news that has happened over the past week since our last show last Tuesday. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber. I am first-person shooter on Facebook and Instagram as a cosplay photographer. Burley_adopter on the diminishing Twitter, for as long as that happens, and Burley Adopter on a bunch of other places as well. Before we get into tonight's topics, as I always do, I want to talk to you about Twitch. I'd like to talk to you about our Lord and Savior Twitch. We do stream this show on Twitch and all of our live stuff on Twitch, as well as Facebook Live and YouTube, whatever platform you happen to be on right now. And on one of those platforms right now is Luminous. Hello, welcome to the show. So if you do have a Twitch account, we'd love to have you follow us there. We're looking to build that viewership to be something like what we have on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So right there on your screen, that URL, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. Check it out if you have a Twitch account. So we're going to jump right into our first topic, and it's not really, it's not much of it's not quite a nothing burger, but it's not a huge story, but it's just an example of government stupidity. In this case, the government in question is Australia, and the stupidity is about whether or not people in Australia will get to buy for home video viewing the anime How Not to Summon a Demon Lord, Omega. So this is in fact a screenshot from that anime from the season Omega. I say season, it's weird. How Not to Summon a Demon Lord came out a few years ago. And then what seems to be the second season is called, they just put the word Omega at the end of it. Except now they've announced that there's going to be a second season of Omega. So it's almost like the first season was, a series unto itself. I don't know. It honestly, the anime isn't worth thinking that hard about how they label it. But the Australian Classification Board announced back earlier in January that it would not review the Demon Lord Omega anime. And by not reviewing it, that means they just automatically say it can't be sold here. It's not worth us reviewing. So you cannot buy this for home video use. You cannot buy a physical product of it or import a physical product of it. The reason this is so stupid is that it already aired on Crunchyroll in Australia. And other way, way worse, I say worse in the sense that the reason it got restricted is probably because it had too strong sexual content. Because the first season, or first series, or whatever they're calling it, was rated MA15 plus for, quote, strong sexual themes. And apparently MA15 plus is an Australian rating for fairly adult content. It's nothing like World End Harem or the currently airing and very problematic My Life as Inokai-san's Dog. It's ecchi. There's hardly any ecchi at a level that they even have to blur things out. That's how boringly ecchi it is. Aaron M., welcome to the show. But for whatever reason, even though you can watch all of that on Crunchyroll in Australia, you can't buy it to have in your house. Come on, Australia. I mean, that's one of the dumbest restrictions I've ever heard of. You can watch Crunchyroll ad-free, which means that the idea of even using credit cards as an age gate, where the kids can't afford to, they'd have to steal their parents' credit cards or whatever, that doesn't apply. You can watch it with ads. So it's not like you're going to keep kids from watching. Now, granted, they'll be censored with, mist and fog and blurs and all the other stuff that, they do to censor these. It's not saying here that they're banning the uncensored version. It's just saying they're banning the sale of it entirely. So, yeah, it's just stupid. Australia, get get intelligent about the way you deal with how some of this content gets displayed to children. Because buying it on home video is that having that as your only restriction is really stupid. Um, oh, and by the way, don't bother watching the show. I mean, I watched the first season um, because it was an interesting concept and they kept it up moderately well and it's got decent etchy. Um, I started the second season and I think I bailed after 3 episodes because it had stopped being dumb, etchy fantasy fun. Oh, yeah, actually, it's technically, I guess, an isekai, um, and had just become dumb with not a lot of the fun left. And so I just stopped watching it. So I can't recommend it. So don't bother wasting your time going to see what the show is and how terrible it is. Because it ain't that terrible. Again, if you really want to watch like ridiculous etchy that absolutely should be up for consideration anyway for not being allowed to be shown or sold, then go watch like World End Harem or something like that. Um, anyway, that's enough about that. Again, not quite nothing burger of a story, but pretty stupid. Moving on to our next topic. This is a scene from the currently airing new adaptation, or new story, I should say, a new anime about Trigun, or about Vash the Stampede and the other characters. In the anime Trigun, the new um, CG animated version is called Trigun Stampede, from Vash the Stampede, the character, in case you've never seen this, and I haven't, to be honest, the character in the red coat with the blonde hair. Um, the news here is that Johnny Young Bosch is going to be coming back after doing the English dub of Vash 25 years ago, is going to be coming back to do the English dub of Vash in the new series. Like I said, the series is currently airing with dub. It wasn't simulcast, so they didn't immediately do an English subtitle or sub as well. Um, but it's currently an English dub as well. It's currently airing with the English subtitles, which started January 7th. The English dub will begin airing January 21st. Um, that's great news for Bosch. It's great news for Trigun fans. I'm probably going to check this out, even though I never watched the original Trigun, because I love Studio Orange. Studio Orange did Land of the Lustrous, which first showed us that yes, CG could be made into beautiful anime, and then Beastars, both seasons. So, and a bunch of other things, but particularly for their CG work, you can't get better than what these people have done with interpreting content into CG. So, again, even though I've never seen the first Trigun, I love Studio Orange's work, so I may jump into this. I haven't yet. There's a lot of stuff that I'm checking out this season. As an aside, this dropped just a couple hours ago. Not enough time for me to pull together all the resources I would need to do it properly, but it will be on next week's show. Apparently, Johnny Young Bosch is, of course, among the cast members that are in the upcoming 30th anniversary special of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I didn't get enough detail about when it's airing and who else is in it and any of the background of it in time for this show. But there's a trailer out there if you want to check it out of sort of a behind the scenes where they interview a bunch of the original cast members. And of course, it would not have Jason David Frank. He's not mentioned in the behind the scenes at all. I've got to assume there's going to be some sort of mention of him. But anyway, we'll talk about that next week. But that, of course, also features Johnny Young Bosch. All right, our next story is an update to a story that just won't stop. And that is the latest on Ezra Miller's legal troubles. So, as you may remember, Ezra Miller was arrested and charged with trespassing and petty theft for stealing, felony burglary charges, petty theft for stealing 3 bottles of liquor from the pantry of a neighbor back on May. He pled not guilty to that. Since his sit down with Warner Brothers executives and apparently their "you've got to get right with Jesus" statement about him, or to him, he has changed his plea. He entered a guilty plea to a lesser charge of trespassing. And he has been sentenced. It's a small fine. It's time served, and it is 1 year of probation. So if he goes back to doing his, if they go back, I am absolutely sorry and will apologize to all of my friends out there for misgendering Ezra Miller up to this point. If they go back to their terrible ways, then it could very well be prison time. So, this is a commitment to some extent for Miller to say, I'm going to try to do right. Because they have committed themselves by pleading guilty to the possibility that if they don't do right in the future, they're going to jail. Well, prison. So is this a step on, a further step on the road of actually correcting their behavior and continuing to get the help they need to prove that they could, in fact, continue working with the DC studios, the newly created DC studios, after the Flash movie comes out this summer? Maybe. It's one tiny possible step. I won't count it as an actual step until we see a second one, because other things that Miller has been charged with are, I think, much more serious. I mean, don't break into anybody's house. Don't steal anything, booze or otherwise. But the harassment charges, the potential grooming charges, or the allegations of grooming, these are things that really need to be addressed in a major way. And frankly, I don't think that Miller has or should have a life with DC content going forward unless all of that is properly addressed, and we can truly believe that Miller is getting the help they need and recovering from whatever was happening in their life, which I'm going to assume is all kinds of issues, emotional, whatever, plus probably substances. So, but anyway, they've pled guilty to one of the smallest charges they've faced, and one of the ones in which there was absolutely no way they could possibly have, well, to a lesser charge, facing one of the smallest charges they could face, and one of the ones where there's absolutely no way they could possibly have defended on it. No, it was cut and dried. So, fingers crossed this is an actual path to redemption for Miller personally, not Miller's persona and brand. I like them as an actor. I frankly could care less whether or not they continue to make money if they don't own up to and properly deal with all of these allegations. So, we'll see. We'll keep you updated. This is one of those stories where when I say we keep you updated, there's always an update within a few weeks, maybe a month at the most. So, we'll let you know. All right. I don't know, Luminous, if you want to shut your ears on this, because we're going to be talking about the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer that just dropped last night, but there's not a lot in there to parse out if you've seen much of the Star Wars content up to this point. It doesn't say, oh, thank you, Luminous. I will go ahead. All right, so this is a screen grab from the trailer for the upcoming Season 3 of The Mandalorian. That trailer dropped during the football game last night, the end of Tom Brady's career football game, if he's smart. And it looks fantastic, of course. It doesn't really give away anything large about what the structure of the story is going to be, except we get to see more Mandalorians, as you can see in this shot, in multiple different scenes. So it does look like, and we know Bo-Katan is going to be a regular character in the upcoming season. And the one thing they do reveal is that sort of to ask forgiveness for taking off his helmet, basically. So apparently he's still somehow in the clutches of this, particular Mandalorian sect that he believes in, which you're not ever allowed to take off your helmet. He's going to the ruins of Mandalore to try to somehow get forgiveness. There are also, it's pretty clear that they are going to be dealing with Grogu's advancement in Grogu's training. And that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I think that interrupting his training at a certain point was probably a good idea, because otherwise Grogu becomes just, the always get out of jail free card. He would just be so incredibly overpowered. And I think it's a good story element to not have his powers developed up to that point. But it's also a good story element to have them developed a little bit more than the incredibly irregular and untrained version of them that existed in the first two seasons. So it looks great, of course. It looks fantastic. The sets look like, the, what do they call it? The volume sets, but they look gorgeous like all of the best of those do. And frankly, when they do those right, I will take those 100% every time over the terrible physical sets that were used for Book of Boba Fett. So, I mean, that it was just bad. So, and by the way, again, everybody Star Wars, take a cue from Andor on how to do real live action sets for real live action stunts. The volume looks great. Build a studio, or build at least most of the parts of a set within the volume, or as much of it as you need, and then use the volume to stretch it out, or whatever. That's enough. I could rant about how amazing Andor is till the end of time, but this is about the Mandalorian. So it does look great. I don't think anybody's going to be disappointed by the look of it. And again, unlike many, many trailers, this really doesn't give away a whole lot about the story. We know he's going to Mandalore. Well, we kind of actually knew that already. We know now that he's going there to try to sort of seek forgiveness for his sins, his indiscretions, whatever. And that's about it. There are people who probably know way more about the Dave Filoni universe part of the Star Wars universe, who could look at things within this trailer and go, ooh, that's this person. I'm not that guy, and so I've got nothing to offer to you to say all the amazing Easter eggs. They're probably in there. There's nothing in there that I didn't see that I couldn't recognize pretty quickly from previous seasons of The Mandalorian. So check it out. It looks really good. It's March 1st is when the series drops, the first episode, and I'm looking forward to it, as I have been for everything here. And by the way, Pedro Pascal, if you like Pedro Pascal's work, it has nothing to do with this, obviously, except him. I cannot recommend strongly enough The Last of Us on HBO Max. He is fantastic as Joel. Absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, go check that out too. But check out The Mandalorian, March 1st. Check out the trailer if you want to do that in advance. All right. Moving on to our last two stories, the first of which, both of which are, problems. The last one, obviously, is the, feature story on all the teasers, so it's a corporate issue. This one is a personal issue. That's a screenshot from the series Solar Opposites. Solar Opposites was created by Justin Roiland, one of the two co-creators of Rick and Morty. And the news is that apparently Roiland is about to face yet another hearing in a domestic battery case that stems from 2020 that has been semi-sealed and just announced or made available publicly. Well, it says today here, but when this article came out, so on January 12th. We don't know who the victim of the battery and the abuse is. It's a Jane Doe. It is alleged to have occurred in January, and the complaint against Roiland was filed in May of 2020. So we're talking about 2.5 years old now. But Roiland is now just facing hearings about this. Roiland has another hearing scheduled on April 27th. So he had a hearing on that date that this article went up, January 12th. He's scheduled to face another hearing on April 27th. And according to this article and Deadline, the speculation is that there may actually be some sort of plea deal to have these two hearings so fairly close together, but not a hearing and a trial. So we'll see when that happens, but I had never heard anything about that, about Roiland being particularly problematic. And of course, his attorney has said to Deadline in a statement, to be clear, not only is Justin innocent, but we also have every expectation that this matter is on course to be dismissed, et cetera, et cetera. So, and apparently he was actually arrested. He posted a $50,000 bond in August over this charge. He's been required to stay at least 100 feet away from the person he allegedly assaulted. Is not to have any contact or to harass the Jane Doe. And the protective order to stay away and not contact was set to last 3 years, which means it was set in October 2020, so it expires this coming year, this coming October. So I had heard, and you may remember this, that the other co-creator, Dan Harmon, had some bad behavior allegations leveled against him. The person, a writer on Community, Megan Gantz, has since accepted his apology, and they, actually they tweeted back and forth with, their sort of, I guess, making it up or making up over it. And then Harmon, surfaced other stuff surfaced about Harmon doing some just like dumb things, along the lines of stuff that James Gunn had done and had since apologized for. Horror Reaper, hello, welcome to the show. If you have any comments on any of the topics we're discussing here, we're on the next to the last one because it's a fairly short show. But obviously we'll be getting into the whole D&D OGL thing in just a few minutes. So Harmon has, done like really dumb stuff, and that's come up, but I've not heard anything bad about Roiland until a person I know has a direct experience with Roiland at doing bad con behavior at a con. So apparently this isn't a surprise to a number of people, including a number of women who have since come forward to tell their own stories about Roiland's behavior. So he looks like he might be, assuming his lawyer is not correct and will not get this dismissed, potentially heading down the Vic Mignogna path. I like Rick and Morty for what it is. I've not watched Solar Opposites, but a number of our team members really like it. He is obviously a creative individual. Doesn't excuse him from being, a terrible person. So, assuming these allegations pan out. So we'll keep up on that. We'll let you know after the April hearing, or if something happens before then, in related to this case about what's going to happen, and whether or not it will have any effect on any of his content going forward. I'm assuming if he winds up either in trial or with a plea deal that somehow indicates that there's some sort of guilt there, that maybe Hulu's going to drop it. Solar Opposites, that is, and who knows what would happen to Rick and Morty and his relationship with Dan Harmon, which, from what I understand, has been pretty contentious at times. Anyway, that's enough about terrible people or a terrible person doing terrible things. Let's talk about terrible people and terrible companies. All right, so this is going to be the toughest one to explain if you haven't been following this. Luminous, are any creative people not terrible? The list keeps getting shorter. Yeah, there are plenty of creative people who aren't terrible. But yes, there are plenty of creative people who are terrible. And it makes it worse when we hear about it because we automatically project we like something they made or do, so we think we like them. And that turns out often not to be the case. They are as bad as anybody else out there, not necessarily any worse. It just hits harder because we are disposed to thinking that we like them because we like what they do. But yeah, there are plenty of really amazing creators out there who do really amazing good work and are not terrible people. Sadly, we hear about the really good ones more than we hear about the others. Anyway, this is an image I used last week in talking about a completely different D&D story, but it's an image officially off the Wizards of the Coast site. Downloadable background wallpaper image of a bunch of different creatures that you can encounter in the D&D games and campaigns. So if you haven't heard about this, if you're a D&D player, you've heard about this. If you aren't, you probably may have heard about it as well. So I'm going to try to do this using all of my tech journalism. Let's do this like we're explaining it to my 8-year-old nephew. When Dungeons and Dragons came out with its 3rd edition in 2000, it published it under a brand new thing that it called the Open Games License, or OGL, which modified very slightly to the current existing version, OGL 1.04. Something like that. So the news is that with the launch of a product, or them talking about a new product, which might have included a new version of the game, the current version being 5th edition, there was also a lot of scuttlebutt about the fact that it may include a new license. So the original OGL basically said that anybody who wanted to make something based on the SRD, the Systems Resource Document, that is a 40-page document that lays out how all of the rules and structure and systems of Dungeons and Dragons work, could do so, could make a commercial product out of it and sell it under this open license. And the only thing they couldn't do is use any specific individual intellectual property, like you couldn't use monsters that were specifically created by D&D creators, like the Beholder. You couldn't use some specific D&D races. You couldn't use really anything in the 4th edition because that was published on its own different game license. The 5th edition went back to this OGL 1.0. So this new 1.1 OGL got leaked, or a draft of it got leaked in early January, and IO9 got their hands on it and published it. And it was a drastic change from the original open game license to be a much less open license. And there were three things that really bothered people the most. The first was that it stated that it would deauthorize the OGL 1.0, which means that at the very least, you could no longer create content that you would make money off of from, say, 3rd edition or 5th edition even, without somehow paying royalties or license fees to Wizards of the Coast, which owns Dungeons and Dragons. The second big problem that most people saw was the fact that there was a royalty fee structure if you are extremely successful. So anybody who made more than $700,000 on their product had to pay a 25% fee. It's 20% if you did it through Kickstarter, which is a whole nother sub aspect of this. And the third thing was that anything you created for commercial use, you automatically granted a sublicense in perpetuity for no money for Wizards of the Coast to use that content at any point in the future if they wanted to put it in their own official stuff. And those are the big three problems. There were other things that a whole bunch of people had a problem with, and the community quite understandably went ballistic. First off, there was even concern about by trying to deauthorize the original open game license that maybe even streamer content like Critical Role and so on might no longer be authorized. You could no longer have ongoing further Critical Role campaigns under 3rd edition or 5th edition structures. Since then, because of all of this nightmare backlash, Wizards of the Coast has released an official statement about it, saying that they're not going to be publishing the Open Game License 1.1 when they said they would. They're going to reconsider all of those features. All right, so now to give them their due, they said, I'm not going to give any of the why we did this. This is all, it's to protect creators, to protect people. It's all corporate bullshit. So they said the next OGL will contain the provisions that allow us to protect and cultivate the inclusive environment we're trying to build, but it will specify that it covers only content for tabletop RPGs. That means that other expressions such as educational and charitable campaigns, live streams, cosplay, virtual tabletop uses, etc., will remain unaffected by any OGL update. Content already released under 1.0A, that's what it is, will also remain unaffected. It will not contain any royalty structure. It will also not include the license back provision. Under any new OGL, you will own the content you create. We won't. So here's a lot of companies, a lot of people writing response articles to this statement have pointed out that does not say that they have removed the sub-license feature. Saying that they won't own it is not the same thing as saying you won't give them a free license to it. So when the next version of this 1.1 comes out, which I'm assuming is going to be called 1.1A, people will be just scouring over every single word to find out whether or not, in fact, there will be an in perpetuity sublicense, because that doesn't say it doesn't exist. It says they won't own it, and that's a completely different thing than sublicensing. The other thing that many people have pointed out about this is that it does not say specifically that they are not going to deauthorize OGL 1.0A, the one that currently exists. They say content already released under 1.0A will also remain unaffected, that implies that you will no longer be able to make content under that license, and that implies they are going to try to deauthorize it. The executives at D&D who created the original game license created it irrevocably in its terminology and in perpetuity, and they believe that they are legally solid in saying that it is not possible to deauthorize it. So there's going to, if it does come out that they are in fact going to try to deauthorize the current game license, the current open game license, there will be lawsuits. There will have to be lawsuits. It's just really a perfect example of, whoops, we made a mistake. Here's what we're going to do, except it doesn't really address all of the complaints, and in particular the biggest complaints of what they were trying to do. It also, I don't know this for sure, this is me just speculating, but having worked in journalism, business journalism, particularly tech journalism, and to some degree game and nerd journalism for decades, the idea that this was accidentally leaked to somebody and IO9 got their hands on it is ridiculous. So they've done this before with the game license that is existing under 4th edition. They actually had some sub-license terminology in that first draft, and enough people just, pinned them to the wall on it that they pulled that out when it was finally published. So I am almost positive that this was deliberately released as a test bench to see what kind of reaction, basically to see what the corporation could get away with and what the community would accept for the corporation getting away with. Their response here indicates to me that they are still going to attempt to get away with the bulk of the two worst aspects of this. Deauthorizing the previous game license so that you can no longer make content under that game license for either 3rd edition or 5th edition without doing some other new license agreement. And the sub-license in some fashion will continue to exist in this next draft. I'm almost positive of it, because that wording, doesn't say, under any new OGL you will own the content you create. We won't. That's the same as under the previous. It's the same as under the game license for edition for the 4th edition. You own it. You created it. They can't own it. Nothing you can sign unless it's a contract will allow them to own something you created. They can put into their license for you to use their product a sub-license agreement, and this does not say that they will not sub-license your content. So it's a well-crafted bit of chicanery that doesn't answer the biggest problems in the complaints the community had for the draft of OGL 1.1. And frankly, there are companies out there that are making a ton of money off of using the SRD. Not a ton, but, Pathfinder. So Paizo, the company behind Pathfinder, would have to, under the proposed draft of OGL 1.1, would have to come up with some sort of licensing agreement and pay royalty fees and all of that. Yes, Luminous, corporations do want your content. I don't want to get all James Stephanie Sterling on this about slamming corporations. Frankly, there are corporations that do not operate under the business model of, I don't want, as much money as I can make. I want all the money. But right now, Wizards of the Coast is demonstrating that it isn't in that camp. Will it roll back to a point where I want as much money as I can make without thoroughly pissing off all of my clients and customers? Maybe, and maybe it will come out with an OGL that includes some of the stuff that it did say it didn't want to do. That it was, it made a mistake. It rolled a 1 in their terms. That's what they said. We clearly understand that we rolled a 1. All right. That doesn't, couching it in game terminology that your clients or customers understand doesn't make it better. So, whether or not they come out with a version that people will accept while still getting them more money out of this whole deal, we'll see. It could happen. And if that's the case and the community is comfortable with it or willing to accept it, I'm fine with that. And sure, the idea that you're using their systems and rules to create a whole new game or campaign or whatever and making money off it without giving them a dime, granted that's what it said you could do in the original game license, is still kind of, that's really weird for a corporation. And if they wind up with something like, a 5% royalty over, if you make over $1 million or something like that, I bet the community would be fine with that, because it's not going to affect any of the people who are making, campaigns on Kickstarter and so on. It's only going to affect a very few large companies or moderately large companies. Unlike, Wizards of the Coast, which makes 1.5 or made $1.5 billion last year. So that is way more than a moderately large company. So we'll see where this goes, what their next attempt at, putting out a, a leaked version of the document of the game license. I would just recommend that if you're interested in this, to go watch the YouTube channel Legal Eagle and their take on this. So he basically says this might ultimately, if somebody wants to take this to court, it might ultimately be a whole tempest in a teapot, because the copyright laws say you cannot copyright processes like systems and rules. So it may not be possible at all for them to even state that they needed to have a license, an open one or otherwise, for you to use the processes behind the game mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons. He's not an IP lawyer, for whatever lawyer he is. So, and he definitely puts that big proviso right out front. But he is a lawyer. And I'm going to say his understanding of the law is probably better than maybe the executives at Wizards of the Coast. Maybe not better than their lawyers. But maybe they also are trying to make this change to the open game license in a way to eventually get over the fact that they really weren't allowed to, license and control as a copywritten product their systems and rules for running a game. So it'll be very interesting to see whether or not that becomes an issue going forward. But anyway, that's it, folks. That's the show for tonight. We will definitely be paying attention to this as it goes forward. I haven't played D&D in a long time. I used to run my own campaigns in a system that I created, with a buddy of mine that was, if anything, based mostly on chivalry and sorcery and not D&D. For those of you who are old enough to know what the heck that was. So, I haven't been that closely involved in this as many of our Nerd Caliber team members are. And, we're talking regular weekly campaign players. So you can bet we'll be paying attention to this. So on that note, let's see. I think our next upcoming, we'll have people at Katsucon. I will not be there myself, but we will have a team. Greg of Wonderlama Photo will be there. Danielle Marie Souza, I believe, will be there. So yeah, middle of February, over the Valentine's Day weekend, we'll have a team at Katsucon. I think our next one is PAX East after that. We'll have a pretty sizable team at PAX East. You can probably find me at my usual spot. And we'll have, photographers, videographers, all kinds of, fun and interesting people doing fun and interesting things at the biggest gaming convention on the East Coast. And then you'll see us, of course, here on this show and doing other things on YouTube. In the meantime, please stay safe. I was at Aresia this past weekend. It had a very restrictive COVID policy. You had to have the bivalent booster and proof of it, and everybody had to be masked with KN95 masks or paper surgical. That part wasn't enforced very well, but the vaccination requirement was absolutely enforced. You could not get a ticket without showing proof of vaccination or having shown proof prior to in a system they had set up via email. And they reported one case already. Actually, they reported it on Sunday of the con of, in fact, a staffer, a volunteer working at the info desk. So, if you were at Aresia, do your test. I'm doing mine tomorrow morning. I have no symptoms, but it's a smart thing to do. And if you're going to any con, this current subvariant of Omicron is the most transmissible that they've found to date. It's also, if you are up on all your shots, the least affecting and most survivable. So, but you still don't want it. So, anyway, stay safe, folks. Wear your mask out in public. And we will see you at an upcoming show or an upcoming con. Thank you all for joining me in the chat tonight. Good night and bye-bye.